The Forgotten Colony. The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched like a cathedral of chrome and crystal, its walls rising hundreds of meters into darkness. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the tiered seating, their forms, as diverse as the worlds they came from. Crystalline beings that sang in harmonious tones sat beside gas cloud entities that shifted colors with their moods. Insectoid delegates clicked their mandibles while reptilian counselors hissed in their ancient languages. At the center of it all, on a platform that seemed to float in midair, stood a single human woman. Ambassador Sarah Chen looked impossibly small in the vast space, her simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and biomodifications of the alien representatives surrounding her, but her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems as she spoke. Honored council members, humanity comes before you today not as conquerors or supplicants, but as neighbors seeking recognition and peaceful coexistence in this galaxy we all share. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembled delegates. Chairman Vextalar, a massive reptilian being whose scales shifted from deep green to bronze in the chamber's lights, leaned forward on his elevated throne, his yellow eyes each the size of dinner plates fixed on the human ambassador, with what could only be described as amused condescension. Ambassador Chen, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. Humanity's petition for council membership has been reviewed extensively. While we acknowledge your species' recent achievements in faster-than-light travel, your civilization remains young. You have only just begun to explore beyond your home system. What could you possibly offer to a council that has governed galactic affairs for over 50,000 years? Sarah Chen's expression remained perfectly neutral, though those who knew her well might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. Chairman Vextaler, we offer the same thing any species does. Our unique perspective, our contributions to galactic knowledge, and our commitment to peaceful cooperation. Your unique perspective, repeated Counselor Thisara, a flowing entity of living liquid that occupied a specialized containment field. Her voice sounded like water over stones. Tell us, Ambassador, what is so unique about a species that has existed for a mere 200,000 years and only achieved spaceflight in the last century? Before Sarah could respond, another voice cut through the chamber. Perhaps the question is not what humanity offers, but what we have already accomplished. The speaker was a tall, weathered man who had entered through one of the chamber's side entrances. His gray hair was cut short in military fashion, and his uniform bore no insignia that the council delegates could recognize. Chairman Vextaler's head swiveled toward the newcomer, his massive form shifting with surprising grace. And you are? General Marcus Stone, representing the human colony of Terra 3. The general's voice was quiet but somehow filled the entire chamber. I apologize for interrupting these proceedings, but there seems to be some confusion about humanity's capabilities. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Several of them began accessing their personal data systems, searching for information about this Terra 3. What they found caused the murmur to grow into concerned whispers. Counselor Zethrak, being that resembled a living constellation of stars within a roughly humanoid outline, spoke first. Terra 3 is listed in our databases as a Class Duthene death world. No known species has ever successfully established a permanent settlement there. That's not quite accurate, General Stone replied, his hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed, military posture. No known species has ever tried to establish a settlement there. Until now. Chairman Vextalar's eyes narrowed to glowing slits. Impossible. Terra 3 is located in the Forbidden Sector. No settlement has been authorized in that region for over 30,000 years. Which brings us to an interesting question, Sarah Chen interjected smoothly. Why exactly is that sector forbidden, Chairman? The silence that followed was deafening. Delegates who had been chittering, humming, or otherwise communicating fell completely quiet. Even the usually chatty crystalline chorus stopped their harmonic. Discussions. General Stone stepped forward, his boots clicking against the chamber's polished floor. Perhaps I can help explain. You see, council members, Terra 3 wasn't always called Terra 3. According to the historical records we found there, it used to have another name, Experimental Site Omega. Several delegates began frantically accessing their databases, but many of the older representatives had gone very still. Chairman Vextaler's scales had shifted to a pale, sickly color. Experimental Site Omega, General Stone continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, was where the Galactic Council conducted weapons testing 37,000 years ago. Biological weapons, chemical warfare, environmental manipulation, all tested on what you thought was an uninhabited world. Councillor Thisara's liquid form rippled with agitation. Those records are classified beyond your species' clearance level. How could you possibly have access to that information? Because, Sarah Chen said quietly, we found the ruins. We found the laboratories. We found the mass graves of the species you used as test subjects. And we found something else. General Stone reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew a small device. When he activated it, a holographic display materialized above the chamber's central platform. The image showed a world from orbit, a beautiful blue and green planet with swirling white clouds and vast oceans. This is Terra 3 as it appears today, he announced. Population: 4.2 million humans across 6 major cities and countless smaller settlements. Agricultural output: sufficient to feed our population with a surplus that we export to nearby systems. Industrial capacity: enough to manufacture everything from basic tools to faster-than-light engines. The hologram zoomed in, showing sprawling cities with gleaming towers reaching toward the sky. Parks and gardens were visible between buildings, and clear rivers wound through urban centers that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural landscape. But this is impossible, stammered Councillor Zethrak. Our last survey of that world showed it to be completely toxic. The atmosphere was poisoned, the soil was contaminated, the water was undrinkable. Nothing could survive there, let alone thrive. You're absolutely right, General Stone agreed. That's exactly what we found when we arrived 12 years ago. A dead world poisoned by 37,000 years of toxic runoff from your experiments. The air was unbreathable, the water was acid, and the soil could kill anything that tried to grow in it. He paused, letting the implications sink in. So we fixed it. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Delegates leaped to their feet, tentacles waving, wings flapping, voices raised in dozens of different languages. The harmonic crystalline chorus produced a sound like breaking glass, while several of the gas cloud entities began flashing colors so rapidly it looked like a lightning storm. Chairman Vextalar slammed his massive fist against his throne's armrest, the sound echoing through the chamber like a thunderclap. "Silence!" he roared, and the chaos gradually subsided. "You claim," he said, his voice dangerously low, "that your species somehow neutralized 37,000 years of accumulated toxins and transformed a class-to-the death world into a habitable planet in 12 years. Not just habitable," Sarah Chen corrected. "Thriving, beautiful, home to millions of our people who wouldn't trade it for any other world in the galaxy." "Even if such a thing were possible," Councillor Thisara interjected, "which it is not, you had no authorization to settle in the Forbidden Sector. The Council demands immediate evacuation of all human personnel from that region." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. General Stone's expression, which had been merely serious before, became something altogether more dangerous. "You demand evacuation," he said slowly, "of our home." "It is not your home," Chairman Vextaler snapped. "It is a Council-designated restricted zone. Your presence there is illegal under galactic law." "Galactic law," General Stone repeated. "The same galactic law that turned a living world into a poisoned wasteland through illegal weapons testing? The same galactic law that left millions of beings to die in agony as test subjects for your experiments. Those events occurred before current Council leadership took power," Councillor Zethrak protested. "We cannot be held responsible for the actions of previous generations. Can't you?" Sarah Chen's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Because according to the records we found, some of the Council members in this very chamber were alive during those experiments. Some of them signed the orders, She turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. Chairman Vex Thaler, for instance, born approximately 58,000 years ago according to public records, appointed to the council 42,000 years ago. That would put you in power during the entire period of the Omega experiments. The reptilian chairman's scales had gone completely white. Around the chamber, other delegates were beginning to stare at the older council members, with new understanding and growing horror. Furthermore, General Stone continued, we found detailed records of 16 different species that were used as test subjects. Most of them are now extinct, presumably as a direct result of their treatment on Terra 3. The few survivors scattered across the galaxy, never knowing why their populations had been so devastated. He activated his device again, and the holographic display changed to show archived footage from the experiments. The images were disturbing, beings suffering from exposure to various toxins, their bodies failing as council scientists took notes and made adjustments to their formulations. So when you demand that we evacuate our home, General Stone said, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to press down on every delegate in the chamber, you're demanding that we abandon the world where we've spent 12 years undoing your crimes. You're asking us to walk away from the place where we've brought life back to a world you killed. The silence stretched for long seconds. Finally, Counselor Thisara found her voice. Even if your accusations are accurate, the fact remains that the forbidden sector was declared off-limits for good reason. The contamination levels were deemed too dangerous for any form of life. Were, Sarah Chen emphasized, past tense. The contamination that existed 12 years ago when we arrived is gone. The toxins have been neutralized. The soil has been cleansed, the atmosphere has been purified. Terra 3 is no longer the dead world you left behind. Impossible, Chairman Vex Thaler muttered, though his protest lacked conviction. You keep using that word, General Stone observed. I don't think it means what you think it means. Would you like to see the before and after environmental reports, the atmospheric composition analyses, the soil samples showing complete absence of the original contaminants? When no one responded, he continued. Or perhaps you'd prefer to review our terraforming methodologies. I'm sure your scientists would be fascinated to learn how we developed bacteria capable of breaking down toxins that had resisted natural decomposition for 37,000 years. Several delegates were now frantically consulting their personal advisors and database systems. The revelations about humanity's apparent technological capabilities were forcing rapid reassessments of Earth's position in the galactic hierarchy. The point remains, Chairman Vex Thaler said, though his voice had lost much of its earlier authority, that your species established an unauthorized colony in restricted space. The Council's authority must be respected. General Stone studied the reptilian chairman for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried an unmistakable edge of steel. Let me make something clear, Chairman. Terra 3 is our home. It's where our children were born, where our families live, where our dead are buried. It's the world we saved from the poison you left behind, the world we've spent over a decade making beautiful again. He stepped closer to the central platform, his eyes never leaving the chairman's face. And if you think we're going to abandon our home because you've suddenly remembered it exists and decided you want it back, then you understand nothing about humanity. The challenge hung in the air like a physical thing. Around the chamber, delegates who had dismissed humanity as a minor species were beginning to realize they might have seriously underestimated these newcomers. Ambassador Sarah Chen's communication device chimed softly. She glanced at it, then looked up at the assembled council with an expression that was perfectly professional and completely unreadable. Chairman Vex Thaler, I've just received word that a council enforcement fleet has been dispatched to Terra 3, 12 heavy cruisers, and their escort vessels, under the command of Commander Zekthul. Her voice remained steady, but something in her tone made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Is this true? The silence that followed was answer enough. General Stone's expression didn't change, but somehow he seemed to grow more dangerous, just standing there. I see. So while we're here engaging in diplomatic discussions, You've already decided to send military force against our home. The fleet was dispatched as a precautionary measure, Chairman Vextaler said, though his words lacked conviction, to ensure compliance with Council directives. To ensure compliance, General Stone repeated slowly, against a civilian population, against families and children living on the world they were born on. He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a sadness that was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. You really don't understand what you've done, do you? The price of underestimation. Commander Zek Thule stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Council heavy cruiser Dominion's Edge, watching as Terra 3 grew larger on the main display screen. The world looked exactly as the human general had claimed. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in weather patterns that suggested a thriving, stable ecosystem. Impossible, he muttered, echoing the words that had become a refrain throughout the Council fleet during their 3-day jump to the Forbidden Sector. His tactical officer, a 6-armed hexarch named Veltar, looked up from her station. Commander, we're receiving multiple communication requests from the planet's surface. They're asking us to identify ourselves and state our intentions. Zek Thule's mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. How refreshingly civilized of them. Open a channel. The main screen shifted to show a human woman in what appeared to be a traffic control center. Behind her, other humans worked at various stations, monitoring what looked like orbital approach vectors and landing schedules. Incoming vessels. This is Terra 3 orbital control. You are approaching inhabited space without proper clearance or identification. Please state your origins and intentions. This is Commander Zek Thule of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. We are here under direct orders from the Council to oversee the immediate evacuation of all human personnel from this world. The woman's expression didn't change, but Zek Thule noticed that several of the humans behind her had stopped what they were doing and were now listening intently. Commander, we have no record of any evacuation orders. Could you please transmit your authorization codes for verification? Zek Thule's mandibles clicked again, this time with irritation. We are not required to provide authorization to squatters occupying restricted territory. You have 48 hours to begin evacuation procedures. Any personnel remaining after that deadline will be removed by force. The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Dominion's Edge in tense silence. Veltar looked up from her tactical display with confusion. Commander, our sensors are detecting some unusual readings from the planet's surface. The population centers are much larger than our initial estimates suggested. How much larger? Sir, our preliminary scans indicate over 4 million human residents across 6 major cities and hundreds of smaller settlements. This isn't a small colony. This is a fully developed world. Zek Thule felt a chill run down his carapace. The intelligence briefings had suggested a small outpost, perhaps a few thousand humans at most. 4 million people couldn't be evacuated in 48 hours, even if they wanted to cooperate. Get me updated sensor readings on everything: population centers, industrial facilities, defensive installations. As his crew worked frantically at their stations, Zek Thule studied the world below. From orbit, Terra 3 looked like a paradise. The cities were marvels of integration with the natural landscape, connected by what appeared to be high-speed transportation networks. Massive agricultural zones fed the population while leaving vast areas of wilderness untouched. Commander, his science officer called out, you need to see this. Our atmospheric analysis shows complete absence of the toxins that were supposed to make this world uninhabitable. The air composition is optimal for most known oxygen-breathing species. That's not possible. The contamination levels recorded in this system would take hundreds of thousands of years to dissipate naturally. Sir, according to these readings, the contamination didn't dissipate. It was actively removed. We're detecting trace signatures of engineered bacteria designed specifically to break down the toxic compounds that were documented in the original survey reports. Zek Thule stared at the data streaming across his displays. The implications were staggering. Not only had the humans somehow neutralized toxins that the galaxy's best scientists had declared permanent, They had developed biotechnology that surpassed anything in the Council's databases. "Sir," Veltar called urgently, "we're detecting movement from the planet's surface. Multiple objects launching from various locations." The tactical display lit up with dozens of contacts rising from Terra 3's atmosphere. They moved with purpose and precision, spreading out in what looked like a defensive formation. "Analysis," Zekthul ordered. "They appear to be spacecraft of human design, but the configuration is unlike anything in our databases. Energy signatures suggest advanced propulsion and weapon systems." One of the rising vessels was larger than the others, its hull gleaming, silver against the black of space. It approached the Council fleet on an intercept course, its intentions unclear, but its message unmistakable. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. Put it through." The face that appeared on the main screen was that of an older human man with gray hair and weathered features. He wore a simple military uniform and spoke with quiet authority. "Commander Zekthul, I am Colonel James Mitchell, commanding the Terra 3 Defense Force. I understand you've come here under orders to evacuate our world. Colonel Mitchell, you are illegally occupying a restricted zone. The Galactic Council has ordered the immediate removal of all human presence from this system." "I see." Mitchell's expression remained neutral. "And if we refuse? Then you will be removed by force." Something that might have been a smile crossed the colonel's face. "Commander, I wonder if you've taken the time to fully survey our world. Since your arrival, we've conducted standard reconnaissance. Your population levels are higher than anticipated, but that doesn't change the fundamental situation." "No, I suppose it doesn't." Mitchell paused, then continued. "Tell me, Commander, what do you see when you look at Terra 3? Zekthul was growing, impatient with the humans' questions. "I see an illegally occupied world that needs to be evacuated." "Look closer." On his tactical display, new contacts were appearing. Not ships this time, but structures. Massive installations that had somehow remained invisible to their initial scans were suddenly revealing themselves across the planet's surface. "What are those?" Veltar whispered. "Defensive installations," Mitchell replied, apparently able to hear the Hexarch's question. "Orbital defense platforms, surface-to-space missile systems, energy weapons arrays. We've spent 12 years not just cleaning up the mess your council left behind, but also making sure no one could ever turn our home into a weapons testing ground again." The tactical display was now showing hundreds of defensive installations across Terra 3's surface. Energy readings suggested weapons technology that matched or exceeded anything in the Council's arsenal. "This is impossible," Zekthul said, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "You keep saying that word. I'm beginning to think you don't know what it means." Mitchell's calm demeanor never wavered. "Commander, let me explain something about humanity. We don't just adapt to harsh environments, we master them. We don't just survive adversity, we use it to make ourselves stronger." The human colonel gestured to something off-screen, and the main display shifted to show a view of one of Terra 3's cities from ground level. The architecture was breathtaking, soaring towers that seemed to grow from the landscape itself, connected by bridges that looked like works of art. Parks and gardens filled with alien flora created a tapestry of colors and shapes that was almost overwhelming in its beauty. "This is New Geneva," Mitchell explained, "built on the site of what used to be Experimental Zone 7, where your predecessors tested biological weapons on captive populations. The memorial park at the city's center is built around the mass grave we found there." The view shifted to show the memorial, a serene space where flowing water cascaded over crystalline structures that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. Humans of all ages moved through the space quietly, some placing flowers, others simply sitting in contemplation. "Every city on our world has a memorial like this," Mitchell continued, "because we found mass graves everywhere, millions of beings who died in agony, so that your council could perfect their weapons of mass destruction." Zekthul felt his confidence crumbling. The intelligence briefings had mentioned nothing about mass graves or experimental zones. If the humans were telling the truth, then Terra 3 wasn't just a restricted zone. It was a crime scene on a galactic Scale. Even if what you're saying is accurate, he managed. The fact remains that this sector is off limits by council decree. You have no legal right to be here. Legal right. Mitchell's voice carried a new edge. Let me ask you something, Commander. If you came home one day and found strangers living in your house, would you respect their legal claim if they told you they'd purchased it legally from someone who had burned it down? The analogy hit harder than Zekthul wanted to admit. The situation is not comparable, isn't it? Your council destroyed this world, then declared it off limits so no one would discover what they'd done. We found it, we cleaned it up, we made it beautiful again. We built our homes here, raised our children here, buried our dead here. And now you want us to leave because the same authority that poisoned our world in the first place has suddenly decided they want it back? The channel fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Around the bridge of the Dominion's edge, crew members were staring at their displays with growing unease. The tactical situation had shifted dramatically from what they'd expected. Sir, Veltar called quietly. Long-range sensors are detecting additional contacts approaching the system. More human vessels? Negative, sir. These are council ships. It appears to be the remainder of our fleet, but they're not responding to our communication attempts. Mitchell's voice cut through the bridge chatter. Commander, I'm afraid those aren't council ships anymore. The main display changed to show a view of space beyond Terra 3's orbit. What had appeared to be council vessels were indeed ships from various member species, but something was wrong with them. They moved in perfect formation, their courses coordinated with mathematical precision. We've been monitoring council fleet movements for some time, Mitchell explained. Your ships are impressive, but they have a critical vulnerability. They're all networked together for coordination purposes. The same systems that allow your fleets to work in perfect harmony also make them susceptible to outside control. The implications hit Zekthul like a physical blow. You've hijacked our ships. We've demonstrated that we could if we chose to. Those vessels are currently under the control of our cybersecurity teams. Their crews are unharmed but unable to access their own command systems. Across the bridge, crew members were frantically checking their own systems. So far, the Dominion's edge seemed unaffected, but the psychological impact was devastating. How? Zekthul demanded. Council military encryption is supposed to be unbreachable. By council standards, perhaps. But remember, Commander, we're the species that developed biotechnology capable of neutralizing 37,000 years of accumulated toxins. Did you really think we couldn't figure out your computer systems? Mitchell leaned forward slightly, and for the first time his calm facade showed a hint of steel underneath. Let me be very clear about our position, Commander. Terra 3 is our home. We will not be evacuated, we will not be relocated. We will not abandon the world we've spent 12 years rebuilding. The Council will not accept— the Council, Mitchell interrupted, will accept whatever we decide they'll accept. Because right now, we control most of your fleet. We have complete information about your military capabilities, and we have defensive systems that you can't even detect until we choose to reveal them. He paused, then continued in a softer tone. But here's the thing, Commander. We don't want to fight you. We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to be left alone to live our lives on the world we've made our home. The tactical display showed the hijacked council ships beginning to move, taking up positions that would trap Zekthul's remaining vessels in a crossfire pattern. It was a demonstration of power that was all the more effective for being completely bloodless. What do you want? Zekthul asked, his voice barely a whisper. Recognition, Mitchell replied simply. Official acknowledgement of our sovereignty over Terra 3, an end to claims that we're illegally occupying restricted space, and a guarantee that the Council will never again attempt to forcibly remove us from our home. I don't have the authority to make such agreements. No, but you have the authority to carry our message back to those who do. Mitchell's image began to fade as the transmission ended. We'll give you 24 hours to consider our terms. After that, we'll assume you've decided on a military solution and will respond accordingly. The channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Dominion's edge in stunned silence. Around them, the void of space was filled with human defensive platforms that had appeared from nowhere. and council vessels that were no longer under council control. Zekathul stared at the tactical display, trying to process what had just happened. His enforcement mission had become something entirely different, a negotiation with a species that had just demonstrated technological and strategic capabilities that dwarfed anything in the Council's databases. "Sir," Veltar said quietly. "What are your orders?" Zekathul looked at the beautiful world below them, then at the defensive formations that surrounded his small fleet. For the first time in his military career, he was completely out of his depth. "Get me a priority communication. Link to the council chambers," he said finally. "I think they need to hear about this." The new galactic order. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in continuous debate for 18 hours. Representatives who normally maintained dignified composure were arguing openly, their voices echoing through the vast chamber, in a cacophony of different languages and communication methods. Chairman Vex Talar's scales had been shifting between pale yellow and deep red throughout the session, reflecting his emotional turmoil. The reptilian leader had aged visibly since Commander Zekathul's report from Terra 3 had arrived, detailing the complete failure of the enforcement mission. "Order! Order!" he roared, slamming his massive fist against his throne's armrest. The chamber gradually fell silent, though the tension remained thick enough to cut with a blade. Ambassador Sarah Chen still stood at the central platform, exactly where she had been when this crisis began. She had not moved for hours, her posture perfect, her expression serene. But her eyes held depths that suggested she knew exactly how this would end. "The situation is clear," declared Councillor Thysiara, her liquid form rippling with agitation. "The humans have used illegal technology to commandeer council vessels. This is an act of war against the lawful authority of this body." "Is it?" Sarah Chen's voice cut through the chamber with crystal clarity, "because according to the reports we've received, no council personnel have been harmed. Your ships are intact, your crews are uninjured, and your military capabilities remain fully functional. The only thing that's changed is that we've demonstrated we can control your systems if we choose to. Control that was gained through illegal infiltration of military networks," snarled Councillor Hexmiran, a crystalline being whose faceted surface reflected angry red light. "Illegal under whose authority?" Sarah asked. "The same authority that conducted illegal weapons testing on an inhabited world? The same authority that covered up genocide and declared the evidence off-limits to investigation?" General Stone materialized. Beside the ambassador, his holographic image transmitted from Terra 3 with perfect clarity. His weathered face showed the strain of the past 24 hours, but his voice remained steady and controlled. "Council members," he began, "I've spent the last day reviewing historical records with your commander Zekathul. He's a good man, and he was horrified to learn what this council did on the world my people now call home." The chamber erupted in angry voices, but Stone continued without raising his voice. Somehow, his quiet words cut through the chaos. "Commander Zekathul has agreed to serve as an independent witness to our evidence. He's seen the mass graves, examined the experimental facilities, and reviewed the classified records we recovered. He can confirm that everything we've told you is accurate." A new holographic display materialized above the central platform, showing Commander Zekathul himself, standing in what appeared to be a preserved laboratory complex. The arthropod commander's usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like shame. "Council members," Zekathul's voice came through clearly despite the vast distance. "I have examined the evidence personally. The humans' claims are not only accurate, they are understated. The scale of the atrocities committed on this world exceeds anything in our recorded history." He gestured to the facility around him. This laboratory complex processed over 2 million test subjects during its operational period. The records show systematic experimentation with biological and chemical weapons, using captured populations from 16 different species as unwilling test subjects. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the usually chatty crystalline chorus had stopped their harmonic discussions. "But that's not the most significant discovery," Zekathul continued. "The humans haven't just cleaned up the environmental damage. They've created detailed memorials for every victim we can identify. They've given names and dignity to beings who died as anonymous test subjects. The display changed to show one of Terra 3's memorial sites. It was breathtaking in its beauty and heartbreaking in its purpose. Thousands of crystalline markers rose from carefully tended gardens, each one inscribed with information about a victim of the experiments. They didn't have to do this, Zekthul said quietly. They could have simply disposed of the remains and built over the grave sites. Instead, they've created a monument to ensure that the victims of our predecessors' crimes are never forgotten. Chairman, Vextalar found his voice, though it sounded hollow. Even if the humans' version of events is accurate, they still have no legal authority to occupy Council territory. Council territory? General Stone's voice carried a new edge that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Chairman, let me share something else we discovered in those classified archives. The holographic display changed again, this time showing what appeared to be an official council document. The text was in the ancient formal script used for the most important legal proceedings. This is Treaty Resolution 847 Omega, signed by the council leadership 37,000 years ago. It officially cedes all claim to what was then called Experimental Site Omega in perpetuity, as reparations for the illegal weapons testing conducted there. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background hum of the chamber's systems seemed to fade away. The treaty states, and I quote, "In recognition of the grave crimes committed at Experimental Site Omega, the Galactic Council hereby renounces all claim to said territory and declares it to be held in trust for any surviving victims of said experiments or their descendants." Sarah Chen stepped forward, her diplomatic training keeping her voice perfectly level despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. According to our analysis of the genetic records found in the experimental facilities, 17% of the human population on Terra 3 carries genetic markers that match those of the test subjects who died there. The implications hit the chamber like a physical wave. Delegates who had been arguing about illegal occupation suddenly realized they were looking at something entirely different. "You're saying," Councillor Thaisara whispered, "that the humans on Terra 3 are descendants of the original test subjects?" "Not all of them," General Stone replied, "but enough to satisfy the terms of Treaty Resolution 847 Omega. Under your own laws signed by your own predecessors, Terra 3 belongs to us." The legal ramifications were staggering. If the humans could prove descendant status from the original victims, then not only was their presence on Terra 3 legal, it was mandated by council law. "This is impossible," Chairman Vextalar said, though the words had become a meaningless refrain. "The victims of those experiments had no descendants. They died before they could reproduce." "Some did," Sarah Chen corrected. "The records show that several species were kept in captivity for multiple generations. Children were born in those facilities, and some of those children survived the final evacuation when the experiments were terminated." She activated her own holographic display, showing genealogical charts that traced family lines across thousands of years. When the survivors were scattered across the galaxy, they carried genetic markers from their time in captivity, markers that their descendants still carry today. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized alongside General Stone, her holographic form flickering slightly due to the vast distance. The chief terraforming scientist of Terra 3 held a data tablet filled with genetic analysis reports. "Chairman Vextalar," she began, "my great-grandmother was designated as test subject 847 Delta in the biological weapons trials. She survived the experiments and was eventually released when the facility was abandoned. She died without ever knowing where she had been held or what had been done to her." Dr. Vasquez's voice remained professionally calm, but there was steel underneath. "When we found her genetic profile in the experimental records, along with documentation of what she endured, it became clear that Terra 3 wasn't just a world we were cleaning up. It was a homecoming." The chamber erupted in confused voices as delegates tried to process the legal and moral complexities of the situation. Some argued that descendants of test subjects couldn't claim rights they had never known they possessed. Others contended that the original treaty was still binding regardless of whether the rightful heirs had been aware of their status. Through it all, the human delegation remained calm and composed. They had clearly anticipated every argument and prepared responses to every challenge. The legal situation is complex, Sarah Chen acknowledged, but there's a simpler way to resolve this dispute. She gestured to General Stone, who nodded and began speaking with quiet authority. Council members, you sent an enforcement fleet to remove us from our home. That fleet is currently under our control, its crews unharmed but unable to access their own systems. We could have destroyed those vessels. We could have taken your people prisoner. We could have used your own weapons against your other fleets. He paused, letting the implication sink in. But we didn't, because that's not who we are. The holographic display changed to show a real-time view of the space around Terra 3. The Council enforcement fleet hung motionless in perfect formation, their weapons powered down, their crews visible through viewport windows, going about their daily routines as if nothing had happened. Your people are being fed, entertained, and cared for better than they would be on their own ships, General Stone continued. Our medical teams have been treating crew members who were suffering from chronic conditions that their own medical bays couldn't address. Several of your officers have asked if they can extend their stay to continue receiving treatment. Commander Zekthul's image reappeared on the display. Council members, I can confirm General Stone's statements. My crew has been treated with respect and courtesy throughout this incident. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our own in every measurable category, yet they've used those capabilities only defensively. The arthropod commander's mandibles clicked together in what his species used to express profound emotion. I've spent the last day touring their cities, meeting their people, learning about their culture. These are not conquerors or aggressors. They are gardeners who have turned a poisoned wasteland into paradise. Another voice joined the conversation as Admiral Tess Morrison materialized beside the other human representatives. Her uniform was different from the others, older, more worn, with insignia that several council delegates recognized as belonging to Earth's Deep Space Exploration Service. Counselors, she began, I've been monitoring galactic communications for the past several hours. The news of what's happening here has spread throughout the galaxy, and the response has been interesting. She activated her own display, showing communication intercepts from across known space. The messages were in dozens of different languages, but their content was remarkably consistent. 17 species have contacted us directly to express support for our position. 9 others have formally withdrawn from council membership in protest of your handling of this situation. 3 species that were previously unknown to the council have revealed themselves specifically to offer alliance with humanity. The numbers were devastating. In less than 24 hours, the council's authority had been challenged not just by humanity, but by a significant portion of the galactic community. But that's not the most significant development, Admiral Morrison continued. We've been contacted by survivors from 12 of the 16 species that were used as test subjects in the original experiments. Populations that the Council presumed extinct have been living in hiding for 37,000 years, afraid to reveal themselves because they knew their oppressors still held power. The revelation struck the chamber like a thunderbolt. Species that had been mourned as extinct were not only alive, but had been watching and waiting for justice. They want to come home, Admiral Morrison said simply. They want to return to the worlds that were taken from them, including Terra 3, and they want to do it under human protection because they've seen what we've built from the ashes of their suffering. Chairman Vexteller's scales had gone completely white. Around the chamber, delegates were staring at displays showing population estimates for species they had thought were extinct. The political ramifications were beyond calculation. What do you want from us? He asked, his voice barely audible. General Stone stepped forward, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute finality. Recognition of human sovereignty over Terra 3 and the surrounding system. Formal acknowledgement that the world belongs to us and our allies, by right of inheritance and restoration, and a guarantee that the Council will never again attempt to interfere with our internal affairs. And in return? Counselor Thisara asked. In return, Sarah Chen replied, we'll share our terraforming technology with any species that wants to restore damaged worlds. We'll provide our medical advances to treat genetic damage caused by the original experiments, and will serve as neutral mediators for any species that wants to seek redress for historical grievances. The offer was staggering in its scope. The humans were essentially offering to undo 37,000 years of environmental and genetic damage, while asking for nothing more than the right to exist peacefully. Furthermore, General Stone added, we're prepared to return control of your enforcement fleet immediately upon acceptance of our terms. Your crews will be released with full honors, and we'll provide detailed technical briefings on how we accessed your systems so you can improve your defenses. The gesture was both magnanimous and strategically brilliant. By offering to help, the Council improved their security after demonstrating how easily it could be compromised. The humans were showing both their good faith and their technical superiority. Chairman Vexteller looked around the chamber at his fellow councilors. The debate that had raged for hours had been replaced by a stunned silence, as the full implications of humanity's offer became clear. You're asking us to admit that our predecessors committed genocide, he said finally. No, Sarah Chen replied. We're asking you to admit that it happened, and to work with us to make sure it never happens again. There's a difference between acknowledging historical crimes and accepting personal responsibility for them. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her holographic image flickering as emotions played across her face. Chairman, my great-grandmother died without ever knowing why she had nightmares about laboratories and needles. Her children grew up with genetic conditions that no one could explain. Her great-grandchildren, my generation, inherited both the physical scars and the psychological trauma of what was done to her. She paused, collecting herself. But when we found Terra 3, when we discovered the truth about what happened there, we didn't seek revenge. We sought healing. We built memorials for the dead, gardens from poisoned soil, and hope from despair. The young scientist's voice grew stronger. What we're offering you isn't just a political solution. It's a chance for the galaxy to heal from wounds that have been festering for 37,000 years. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Counselor Zethrak, the being who resembled a living constellation, spoke in a voice like distant thunder. The vote must be formal and recorded, all in favor of recognizing human sovereignty over Terra 3 and accepting their terms for galactic cooperation. The voting took place in traditional council fashion, with each species casting their decision through biometric confirmation that could not be falsified or coerced. The process took nearly an hour as representatives consulted with their home governments across vast distances. When the final tally was announced, the result was overwhelming. 847 species in favor, 23 opposed, and 156 abstentions. Chairman Vexteller's scales had slowly shifted from white to a deep, resigned blue. The motion passes. Terra 3 is hereby recognized as a sovereign human world, with all rights and protections accorded to Council member species. He paused, then continued with what might have been the ghost of a smile. Furthermore, the Council formally invites humanity to join our body as a full member species, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. Sarah Chen bowed slightly, her diplomatic training perfect even in this moment of triumph. On behalf of humanity, I accept your invitation. We look forward to working with all Council species as equals in building a better galaxy for all our children. General Stone's image flickered as he saluted the assembly. Council members, you'll find that your enforcement fleet is now fully under your control again. Commander Zekathul has been briefed on our defensive capabilities and can answer any questions about our military technologies. As the formal session came to an end, delegates began filing out of the chamber in small groups. Their conversations animated as they processed what had just occurred. The galaxy had changed in the space of a few days, and everyone knew that the old order was gone forever. Admiral Morrison's final words echoed through the chamber as the transmission ended. Terra 3 sends its greetings to the galaxy. We look forward to welcoming visitors who come in peace and to working with all species in building a future worthy of the sacrifices made by those who came before us. The screen went dark, leaving the council chamber in contemplative silence. Humanity had not just won recognition of their right to exist, they had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy through demonstration rather than force. through healing rather than conquest. In the months that followed, Terra 3 would become a pilgrimage site for survivors of the ancient experiments and their descendants. The memorial gardens would expand to honor victims from across the galaxy, while the cities would grow to accommodate new residents from species thought extinct. But the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. They were no longer seen as newcomers or primitives, but as the species that had taken the galaxy's greatest shame and transformed it into its greatest hope. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human leadership had begun. The end